So we are going to run through this lecture. We're going to do it in a classroom to see if that helps you learn the material better. That way you can pause it when you miss something, or you can ask me questions, and I can be wandering around to help you. So I'm going to insert this little bit of human anatomy and physiology so that you get application for what we've already done with enzymes. Anatomy means structures, so we're going to look at different structures that evolved to do different processes, and the processes are called physiology. So in other words, how is something set up, and how does that setup help it do whatever it does? That's anatomy and physiology. There are 5 steps in digestion. You can also think of it as 4. I just split up the digestion part. And so you have to get the food into your body if you are an animal. And that is called ingestion. And so usually it's a mouth if it's an animal. But then there's some really simple animals like sponges that bring it in through pores, or hydra that bring it in through an opening into a cavity. Mechanical digestion. You guys, when you did the quiz, you talked about that. It's just increasing the surface area of a substance. Chemical digestion is actually a chemical reaction happening on it and breaking it down into its products. Absorption, you did this a little bit for the midterm. It has to do with stuff passing through membranes from high concentrations to low concentrations. It's called diffusion. And so things absorb through the lining of the membrane. So biological absorption or diffusion happens through a membrane. And so you're going from a high concentration to a low concentration through the membrane. And so essentially in the digestive system, it's going from the digestive system to the blood or to the lymph vessels. We'll talk about that too. And then elimination, you're getting it out of your body, the stuff that you could not digest, and that's mostly cellulose. And so take a look at this picture right here. So you should be able to recognize structures in anything that has to do with anatomy and physiology. So go ahead and fill in as I go. Number 1, obviously the mouth. 2, I don't know if you can tell what that is. One of the strongest muscles in your body is the tongue. Really important in chewing, as you'll see tomorrow in the lab. 3, these are kind of embedded in the back. You can't see these when you open your mouth, but they're called salivary glands. And these are made of cells that are going to manufacture mucus and amylase, and they're actually going to manufacture water also. 4 is my favorite because I saw it for the first time in my early 20s. I'd heard about the epiglottis. I was wondering if you could see it. I was a singer. I didn't know if you could see your vocal cord, so I looked down my throat and I saw my epiglottis. I had no idea it was there. So you could do that too. Take a flashlight, go into a dark bathroom, lock the door so no one knows what you're doing, shine the light into your throat and gag, and you'll actually see in your throat an epiglottis. And that epiglottis is really important because it stops stuff from going into your lungs when you're swallowing, and it stops air from going into your digestive system when you're breathing. 5 is the esophagus. And so right now, if you take your hand and you feel the front of your throat, you're going to feel rings. And those rings are actually part of your respiratory system. They're called trachea. And behind that trachea is your esophagus, and you're going to see that in the pig. 6 is a huge organ, your liver. 7 is the stomach. So if you find your sternum, which is the bone in the middle of your chest, and you go down from there until it starts getting soft, so there's a V there, you're actually pushing in on your liver when you push in, and you're also pushing in on your stomach. And so actually this is where a stomach ache happens, right below your sternum. And so most aches are actually not stomach aches, but intestinal aches, because they happen lower down. 8 is the pancreas. You're going to get to see that in the pig dissection. It's almost like a brainy tissue right underneath the stomach. 9 is the large intestine, which is the same word as colon. 10 is your small intestine, really, really long. I think you learned that in the movie you saw. 11 is the appendix. We will talk more about that. 12 is the rectum. So that's where stuff hangs out until you can eliminate. 13 is the anus, which is a sphincter that keeps everything in until you can eliminate it. Now, if you look to the left, all they're showing you is a kind of a more open picture of the things that are kind of stuffed in on the image to the right. And so some of these we've already done, but you can see them a little more clearly. So 14 is the stomach. You can see it's shaped like a J. 16 is the gallbladder, which is actually up embedded in your liver. There's the liver, really huge organ, and then there's the pancreas. You can see it more clearly. So there is a tube running down the center of you, and that tube was developed really early on when you were an embryo. And so the first opening that happened when you were a ball of cells, the first opening was actually your anus, and then the cells migrated to create your mouth. So despite the fact you are developed anus first, you're one of those organisms, so you are called a deuterostrome, which has to do with that your anus developed first. We're going to start with mouth first, since that's how you digest things or ingest. So the tube, if you can imagine, there's going to be your mouth. There's going to be your esophagus, and there's a little part in between your mouth and esophagus called the pharynx. But so just know there's a teeny part. It's kind of more the respiratory system, but your food does pass by there. And then you have your food hits the stomach, then it goes to the small intestine, goes to the large intestine, rectum, and anus. This picture, I wanted to spend a lot of time looking at this picture, because what this picture is showing you, it's kind of going beyond the structures and starting to look at what happens in those areas. So starting at the mouth again, that's where ingestion occurs. You need to know that. You have these amazing teeth that are designed to increase the surface area of your food if you take the time to chew, which sometimes we do not. So hopefully you'll do that in the pizza lab tomorrow. Take the time to chew. Maybe, go for 20 times chewing. If you can, it's much better to do that. So chewing is a mechanical digestion. And you can see here in your mouth, the salivary glands make amylase. Remember we talked about that? And that is an enzyme that breaks down amylose, which is starch. And then you get to your esophagus. And from there on, all the way through your digestive system, there's something called peristalsis. And I kind of think of it as stirring. The food is being stirred and mixed. It's being squeezed as it goes down through you. And then you have your gastric glands, which is the lining of your stomach. And those cells that make up the glands are manufacturing pepsin, which is an enzyme that breaks down proteins into amino acids. So here's the thing, you guys. The stomach, the acid in the stomach is not there to break down your food. The acid in your stomach, it's actually a pH of 1, which is a really low pH. It is there actually to create the perfect environment for pepsin to work. So that's often people mistake what hydrochloric acid actually does. So now we're going through your alimentary canal. So I'm going to skip over the stuff that's coming in to this tube, and I'm going to keep going down. So there's your small intestine, which is part of the tube. And so notice there are things that are put into the small intestine. And those things are secreted in by the liver and the pancreas. So in other words, the liver and the pancreas are not part of the tube that runs through you. They squirt into that tube. And so liver squirts in bile, which is an emulsifier, and it's part of mechanical digestion, because that bile is going to increase the surface area of fat. And so I want you to write that down. I want you to circle the word bile and write emulsifier, E-M-U-L-S-I-F-I-E-R. I hope I spelled that right. It's an emulsifier, so it increases the surface area of the fat so that later on enzymes can break down the fat. So it is part of mechanical digestion. And then look at all the things your pancreas cells manufacture. There's little factories in there manufacturing all of that stuff. This is also, your small intestine is where the stuff absorbs into your blood and your lymphatic system. So look at all those things, all those monomers now. They've been broken down and they're going to absorb through the villi of your small intestine. We'll see that in a second. And then your intestinal glands also manufacture tons of stuff, maltase, lactase, sucrase. And so these are your small intestine cells. And then food that can't be absorbed, stuff that your body can't biologically break down, continues on to your large intestine. And there it awaits elimination in a section called the rectum. And then the anus is the sphincter that will send it out when you have the time to go to the bathroom. Meanwhile, large intestine, really, really important. This is where water is absorbed back into your bloodstream so that you don't become dehydrated and salt. And I also want you to circle large intestine and that's where bacteria hangs out in your body, making vitamin K for you and doing all sorts of really important stuff. So you actually have bacteria living in your gut right now. It's called E. coli. Okay, so there's a lot to this. Hopefully you circled liver and you circled large intestine, because I just want you to know what's happening in there. Take a look at the structures, because later on you are going to have to write those down. Okay, so we're going to take it again, and we're going to kind of go through the detail. So mouth, you have these teeth, you have these incisors in front for tearing, you have molars for grinding, increasing the surface area. And so you have a particular type of teeth, dogs have a particular type of teeth. They've evolved to help you eat what you are supposed to be eating. And so teeth and tongue, what do? They are part of the mechanical digestion. They're increasing the surface area, and you'll find out with the pizza tomorrow, your tongue really plays an important role of kind of mixing. Again, it's kind of like a stirring spoon. It's mixing everything. It's moving your food against your hard palate on the top of your mouth. So the salivary glands, especially when you smell something good, sometimes you feel them squirt. They're part of chemical digestion. They're producing amylase. So we did a lab around this, and that amylase is chemically breaking down polysaccharides into disaccharides, or simple sugar. Now, if you remember what that simple sugar was, write it down, because I might give you extra credit for remembering. In that lab, what starch was broken down into with amylase. Okay, so then there's this little part I told you called the pharynx, a little tube, doesn't really do anything in your digestive system. And then starts the big tube, the esophagus. The esophagus is surrounded by different types of smooth muscle, and it's contracting. It's involuntary. You can't control it like you can control your skeletal muscles. And so everything from your esophagus all the way down to your rectum, actually probably a little bit before your rectum, is going through this peristalsis, this contraction, moving the food through, mixing it. It's part of the mechanical digestion. Stomach, it reaches your stomach, and your stomach does both types of digestion. It does mechanical, so you can hear your stomach growling. That's mechanical digestion. It's opening and closing. It's also doing chemical digestion. So you have gastric juices that are made by the stomach cells, and they contain pepsin, which is the enzyme that needs a pH of 1 to do its thing. And it breaks down the proteins into amino acids. So that's all that goes on in your stomach. The food down there is going to churn and get ready to be squirted into your small intestine, little bits at a time. There's actually a sphincter. Look in the picture. It's called the pylorus. So I want you to circle the word pylorus and put sphincter. And sphincter is spelled S-P-H-I-N-C-T-E-R. And then it goes into the first part of your small intestine, which has a fancy name, duodenum. But look at how your stomach is layered. See all those layers? And you can see your esophagus coming in. And there's actually another sphincter at the top of the stomach, or the bottom of the esophagus, called the cardiac sphincter. So I want you to put a little line in at the top of the stomach and write cardiac sphincter, S-P-H-I-N-C-T-E-R. There's so much to learn about anatomy and physiology. It's so cool. You can take the course next year if you want to learn more. So then I think the most important part of the whole digestive system is the small intestine. It does so much for you. So there's tons of chemical digestion happening there, not only from the cells that line your small intestine, but from structures that are they're secreting stuff into the first part of your small intestine, the duodenum. So you have pancreas secreting lipase and other enzymes. So you can go back and look at that picture before. Lipase breaks down fats into, remember those building blocks, glycerol and fatty acid. And then there's that mechanical grinding, that peristalsis occurring. And then meanwhile, in the duodenum, the bile comes in through a duct. There's a Y-shaped duct. You'll see it in the pig dissection. And so it comes in and the liver produces the bile, manufactures it, and then stores it in the gallbladder. And then it gets popped into your duodenum when you need it. And like I said, bile is an emulsifier, which increases the surface area of the fat, makes the smaller droplets. The small intestine is amazing in the surface area that it has. The movie talked about it. Look at those villi that are coming down, increasing, I think the movie said by a factor of 8, the surface, so that absorption can happen there. So right on the other side of those villi are your blood vessels waiting to take the stuff where they are needed. So absorption, what's being absorbed through the villi? They are monosaccharides, amino acids, fatty acids, and glycerol. Those are the nutrients, and the fourth nutrient is the nucleotides. Now I want you to circle fatty acids and glycerol, and I want you to put that they go to your lymph system, which is a totally different system than your circulatory system. And so I want you to somehow link monosaccharides, amino acids, and nucleotides and put that they go to the blood. And so when I grade this, I'll make sure you have done that. The large intestine, really important. It's absorbing the water that's in the food. Remember, that's one of the ways you can get water as an animal. You can drink it, it's in your food, or you actually can make it through the dehydration synthesis that's happening in your body as molecules are being made. And so, but you need that water in the food, so it's going to be absorbed through those membranes through a process called osmosis, from a high concentration of water to a low concentration of water in your blood. These small vessels called capillaries that are hanging out on the other side of the wall of your large intestine. So when you guys were talking about amoebas, giardia, right, those diseases, what happens, or flu, I don't think anyone did the stomach flu. So those pathogens are actually attacking the cells of your large intestine, which then the whole large intestine starts to spasm. And meanwhile, it stops working. It stops absorbing the water into your bloodstream, and you start having diarrhea. And diarrhea is actually the #1 killer of kids in the world, because if you become dehydrated, your body cannot work. Rectum, it's where stuff hangs out, so it's the end of your colon. Stuff is hanging out until you can eliminate. Now, I want you to go through, I want you to identify these parts, try not to look back, identify these parts, and then tell me something physiological that's happening in all of these parts once you write down the structure name. Again, try not to look back, work with each other, have fun. Hope you guys learned something.